I'm John.
I'm Rob,
And this is the Mint One Podcast.
where we talk all things NFTs and the rise of blockchain gaming.
So Rob, it's special guest time once again. Who have we got?
It's Eddie Fear, Game Director at Skyweaver.
Eddie Fear, Game Director at Skyweaver. It's an absolute pleasure to have you on the show, my friend. How are you doing today?
I'm doing extremely well. Thank you guys for having me.
Fantastic. And our typical opening question for all of our guests. Just want to get a bit of a feeling before we get into Skyweaver. A bit about you. So what's your background? How did you get into the Web3 space and how did you end up where you are today, working and leading Skyweaver?
So I spent about a decade in proper game development. I worked for Upper Deck Entertainment. I did some work for Blizzard Entertainment around the time of the Activision Blizzard merger. I worked on games from licenses from the World of Warcraft to Marvel to DC Comics. The first sort of mainstream game I designed was the Versus system, which was a collectible card game using the Marvel and DC comic licenses, which we started in 2003 and kind of sort of gave up on right before it would have been really valuable. Like, we kind of stopped really promoting the game in about 2007. Still made today. They morphed it into one of those living two-player card games. So they're still releasing content under those rules today. It's been 20 years now. But we stopped producing it as like a professional, pro tour, high-level game, like right before the first Iron Man movie came out. So we really timed that out pretty brilliantly. About 2010, I started working more on daily fantasy sports, proper degenerate gambling, which was fun and all, but with the legalization of full degenerate gambling sweeping across the United States, any hope on making that space a little more interesting and gamifying it and making it more fun was kind of gone. And so I returned to traditional games. I did a couple contracts with companies in the Web3 space. And then I was introduced to Peter, who's the CEO at Verizon Blockchain Games, which is the company that makes Skyweaver, as you probably deduced. And after only 6 interviews, was hired on as their game director about 4 months ago.
6 interviews. That's quite the process. Are they with the same people, or are you having to go up the ranks?
They were fun. They actually recorded one of them, and in the history of my career, he got an odd request. He's like, we're 2 minutes into the interview, and he's like, do you mind if I record this and then share it with our whole design and development team? And like, sort of my take on the interview, as frequently the case, is here's what's wrong and here's how I'm going to fix it and make it better. And it was not rude, but perhaps unflinching with some of the design decisions I did, and I'm like, sure. So then eventually I get hired, and like the beginning of every meeting for a while, I was like, look, I just wanted to say to all you guys, I apologize for whoever's work I trashed when I was interviewed, and then the boss shared that around. But
So how long have you been working on Skyweaver now?
4 months.
4 months. Okay.
4 months. I was hired in mid-January.
Okay. So I mean, I've been playing it for a while now.
Yeah.
In fact, it got me through a lovely but very difficult time of my life where my son had just been born and we were having to take it in shifts because he'd only sleep on our chests.
Sure.
So my girlfriend would sleep and then I would have him on my chest. But you can't, obviously, it's a newborn. If you fall asleep, you end up crushing them,
Did you ever fall asleep and have, because I had the exact same thing. I have one child, my daughter, and she slept here for a long time. And there were a couple times I did fall asleep. And
I won't admit to it.
It was terrifying. I'll admit to it. I did it and woke up and was terrified. There's 3/4 of a second of sheer panic. And again, I'm a big guy. I was like, oh no, I crushed the baby. There's like a half second there. That's very
there's very little going back once baby is crushed. So to keep myself awake, I was playing Skyweaver obsessively from 2 a.m. till 6 a.m. Every night. So I have played a lot of games of it. What was your do you enjoy TCGs generally? Obviously,
I love them.
You've got a background.
Oh, yeah. I've designed a few. I played on the Magic the Gathering Pro Tour for about 5 years. I've played.
Wow. Cool.
I owned my own game and hobby store in New York for 12 years, which is still running today.
Really?
It's called Millennium Games. It opened in 98. But I have served as a judge and run tournaments with multiple hundreds of people for Magic the Gathering and Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh! So I've played just about all the card games. I love me a game of any sort. Like, I've worked on role-playing games and dice games and board games, but certainly trading card games are one of my first loves. We're coming up on, this is, I think, 30. Yeah, I was at the Gen Con when they introduced Magic, which off the top of my head, I believe was 93. So, 30 years ago, but I've played many collectible card game. And yeah, they're outstanding. And they are particularly well born and inclined towards digital ownership and blockchain existence. They are maybe not the best, but I think the most obvious application thereof. Like previously, like I have no idea, thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars into MTGO, Magic the Gathering Online, not to be confused with the more popular current iteration of MTGA, which is a much more streamlined experience. Magic the Gathering Online was just the full Magic experience. It was just digitized Magic, but it was an hour a match, and tournaments would take 13 hours, and you could just a full draft that was a full draft, and it was just a very... I put so much money into that, but it has given way to MTGA, and any assets I had there are trapped on that server. Web3 with trading card games is outstanding because you actually own the cards, which is a huge leap.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of tournaments and, of course, of draft, brings on to one of the biggest parts of your 2023 roadmap, which is the upcoming draft mode for Skyweaver. So, obviously, for people that have played MTG Draft or Hearthstone's Arena, it's a format that, you know, those people will be familiar with. But the two kind of questions I had around this were, one, I think in the roadmap you say that there's going to be specific heroes for the draft mode. So I wanted to touch on, you know, if there's any further info about, you know, them and their abilities. And also, you discussed the draft mode, but obviously you've got Hearthstone's Arena, which is one approach, and you've got your Conquest mode, of course, which is, I guess, another kind of similar approach. So what kind of way are we going to go with the draft mode? Is it going to be, hey, create your 25-card deck and then, you know, play as many games as you can and then 3 losses and you're done? Or what's the kind of idea behind the approach you're going to take?
So it's important to understand, like, the draft distinction is how you create your deck, not necessarily what you do with it when you're done. Yep. So drafting is a limited format, to give the 30 seconds for anyone who isn't immediately familiar with what I'm talking about. Basically, in card games, things are divided between constructed and limited. And that just means in constructed, you construct a deck, you bring it with you, and you play with it. That's what constructed means, no matter what it is. Whether it's anything that you just bring the deck with you, that was constructed. Limited is when there is some limited pool of cards, either a sealed deck or you draft a deck. So basically, in draft, everyone opens a pack of cards. They take one card from their pack. They pass it to someone else. They pick up the pack that was passed to them and repeat. And you use that to get a pool of cards, some or all of which, depending on the game and format, you use to build your deck or that pile of cards. In some of the better digital aspirations, just is your deck. Again, one of the adjustments to make things more streamlined, more mobile-friendly, making a draft take an hour instead of 5 hours is, you know, Magic the Gathering Online, you would have to draft your cards and then curate a deck and then add basic land, and then it's a much bigger process. So what we're currently looking at is a process that eschews the necessity to have time to specifically build your deck after the draft. You're going to build your deck and you're going to go. But once you've got that deck, we will have, as you mentioned, formats that are very similar to, and this is part of our tournament structure that's coming out roughly concurrently, formats where you'll play as many matches as you can over 24 hours, or play 5 matches whenever you want over 24 hours, as opposed to a synchronous tournament. And you'll have drafts where they are what an MTGO, for example, you called Phantom Drafts, where you won't keep any of the cards, and then you will have ones where there are actual Web3 assets on the table. There are gold and silver cards that'll be kept by the person who drafts them. So sort of yes to everything you asked. We'll have very simple, very casual, very league-like, play as many matches as you want over this period of time, asynchronous. Similarly, you also will end up in a more casual draft playing across pods, where our draft is most frequently going to be 4 people instead of 8. We think that's a pretty significant improvement, honestly. A lot of games stick with 8-player draft. That makes it hard to track the rest of your draft. Like, you gotta know what this guy's doing, and you kind of know what this person's doing. But the 5 people across the table, they're just sort of an amorphous soup of, I know they took these 5 cards somewhere. When you shrink a table size down to 4 people, you get a pretty good sense of what everyone's doing. And as you get better at the draft format, you can become more expert in reading that draft and even steering that draft with your particular acumen. But in a serious draft, they'll be mostly round robin. You'll draft with 3 other people. You'll play those 3 other people. This tells you a lot of things. Hearthstone is a singleton game. There's not more than one copy of any card in any deck that will persist into draft, which means if a card is in your deck and you're playing within your pod, no one else has that card. And if you're a particular hero, no one else is that hero, for they are also singleton. If we throw you in a 500-person league that just says play 6 matches today, you could end up playing someone with very similar cards, the same cards, with the same hero, and really you'd have no idea whatsoever is coming at you. So again, as you get more serious, the requirements to play get a little more strict. And again, in the latter category, you would have synchronous play. You would be expected to draft, then play, as opposed to in another format, you could draft, go back to work, sneak in a match on the toilet during your lunch break, et cetera, and just try to get a game in, So, yeah.
I want to pick on the whole tournament thing a little bit more.
Sure.
One of my favorite parts of Web3 gaming is the sort of automated tournaments we're seeing. And although I don't like the connotations with play to earn anymore, I think that is the best iteration of play to earn, is the sort of merit-based rewards of automated tournaments, and the prize pool is just from the entry fees, and it's divvied out that way.
Yeah.
You may have answered this before. I can't recall seeing any documentation on it. Are you looking at doing any more sort of formalized tournaments where a prize pool is put up and people can enter? Could you tell us about that? That sounds good.
Yeah, so our tournament structure is going to be fairly robust. We're actually going to roll it out in steps to make sure everything works. Going from right now, where basically every competition on the site is either 2 people or 8 people, as you alluded to Conquest before. We're going to roll that out to 32 to 64 to unlimited. We plan on, in pretty short order, throwing 500 people in the same competition for some pretty decent prizes. So we'll have dailies that qualify you for weeklies, that qualify you for the seasonal championship, that qualify you for the yearly. We do look at this as a nascent step to building a proper esports infrastructure. And one of those things is the ability to have one tournament that feeds into another. So obviously that's part of it. Again, similarly, the more complex and significant tournaments get, the more prizes that are at stake, the more likely they are to require more synchronous play. So, for example, a daily tournament that qualifies for a weekly, we'll say, may simply be play 5 rounds at any point today. The tournament will be open for several hours, and then when it closes, you'll have 12 hours to play 5 matches against anyone you get, and then it'll be Swiss. So as opposed to, say, Conquest right now and everything else we have, which is Swiss, is just another way of saying you don't immediately get ejected after any number of losses. So in a single elimination tournament, when you lose, you're out. Conquest is single elimination. If you play Conquest and you lose in the first round, you're done. Significant skill testing card games and bigger card games, and especially any type of game that has rounds as short as ours can be. If you're playing a single round of Skyweaver, it's probably a 15-minute round. It might be a 20-minute round if you wanted to ensure everybody got done. But they're pretty quick rounds. It's much better to have Swiss, which just means that every round you play against someone with the same record as you. So if you're in the 7th round of a tournament and you've won 4 times and lost twice, you will play someone else who has won 4 times and lost twice. So for daily tournaments, that may be largely asynchronous, and we do the best we can to pair you against someone with an identical record. But as you get into weekly and certainly the seasonal championships, it'll be your round starts at 1. Your next round starts at 120. And again, we're actually developing the back end to handle both. The next round starts as soon as everyone is done, and the next round starts at this time. So it wouldn't be crazy if we wanted to for a super thing, and this helps with community and marketing, and you can just schedule matches to a certain degree, but you can almost always guarantee a match is done in 20 minutes, let's say. And additionally, we are probably going to implement a chess clock system for the tournaments, where you will literally have X time. So I'll have 10 minutes and you'll have 10 minutes. And by definition, we cannot exceed 20 because the first person to run out of time loses. It also helps you with needing to put in some sort of other ugly tiebreaker mechanisms. It's ideal for a trading card game and pairing not to allow ties, because you lead to collusion and intentional drawing, and it just opens up a entire web of things. It's definitely easier if you can do it to not allow a tie to be at all of a possibility. So I suspect in our high-level tournament mode, you will be unable to tie. In the event you had an unintentional tie or even an intentional tie where both players expired by taking too much damage to their hero concurrently, you would start another game, and it would go until someone won that game or until someone ran out of time. But yeah, it's exciting. It is a very robust system, as I mentioned before, and people are excited to do it. And it certainly ties in well with drafts, because drafts are another form of tournament organizing. It's setting up a round robin. And the tournament system had to be designed with draft in mind, because we would like to be able to have a championship draft. Well, how do you do that? Like, if you can put 4 people in a pod, your logical sizes are 4, 16, and 64. If you have 16 people in a premium draft of some sort, they would break into 4 pods of 4. The winners of each of those pods would then play each other in a new draft. And that way you could arrive at one champion.
Sure.
Yeah, a very exciting development for Skyweaver for sure. Do you know when we might start to see these the draft mode and the associated tournaments go live? I think the roadmap mentioned sometime this summer, but is there any other?
No, this summer isn't happening. So the rough. Now you're making me look bad. No, we won't possibly do that. Speaking of looking bad, I wanted to tell a fair story before I miss this, because I thought this was funny. So we were preparing in emails for this, and again, you and we haven't met previously to recording this podcast. You gentlemen were lucky enough to encounter one of my betters. I think at NFT NYC you met a guy named Michael Sanders, who is our chief storytelling officer, who is in many ways all that. But just before coming on to this podcast, you guys sent me reference that I should set up my camera because it was a video podcast, which I was unaware of until 10 or 15 or 20 minutes ago. So I had planned to use that time to review the roadmap, to, mentally prepare some answers to any difficult questions that might be there. Immediately that became a lower priority. I had to get the hair up, because you were saying that there was no way I could compete with Michael's hair. And again, Michael does have a beautiful head of hair. He's a very attractive man. It keeps me up at night. But one of my favorite stories is that I realized through my first few weeks in January at Skyweaver that we, as a company, Horizon Blockchain Games, have incredible lettuce. We have the best hair of any company I've ever worked at. Now, there's a chance, this being a Web3 company, we skew younger, but just gorgeous head of hair after gorgeous head of hair. So much so that there's about 70 people at Horizon, and about 3 weeks into my tenure, I'm entering a development meeting, a front-end development meeting for the first time, and I came face-to-face with the first gentleman I had seen at the company who did not have a beautiful head of hair. He had, some male pattern baldness, and I immediately turned to Philippe, who is the gentleman who was basically training me for my position, and said, "Does that guy work here?" He's like, "Yeah," and I'm like, "Oh God." What does he do? And he's like, he's the lead front end developer, and I'm like, is he?
It's not going to work.
Is he good at it? He's like, yeah, he's outstanding. He's been here for years. He's amazing. He's an integral part of the team, and I'm like, when you say integral, so anyhow, it was a whole thing. But with rare exception, Horizon Blockchain Games, best lettuce in the Web3 space, trademark, copyright. Sorry, I just wanted to get that out because, I don't know, it's been a hair morning.
We talked after the Michael Sanders podcast. I think I gushed about his hair in the outro, didn't I? About
You did, yes. And then I sent it to him, and he was like, "Oh, you were very kind, thank you."
Yeah,
it's like a L'Oreal advert. The entire podcast. I'm just scared. It's shiny. It's
square jaw.
Yeah, it is annoying. He's also unflappable. He was at a metaverse event in London.
Yep.
And he walks up to me and said hi, gave me a hug. We were chatting, catching up a little bit. And he's like, "Yeah, I'm just coming back from the gym. I landed. I went to the gym. I got robbed.
Yeah.
I lost my phone, my passport, my wallet. And then I've just come to the event, and I figured that out later. I've got a talk at the event. I mean, I'd be in pieces. I'd be beside myself. He's absolutely unflappable.
Oh, we were at GDC, and he did repeatedly 5, 6, 7 podcast video interviews in a day, subject of them, hosting them, and unflappable, very strong presence, clearly spoken, never hurried, or I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop.
It's a bit annoying, isn't it?
It's exactly. I'm like, there's something I don't Like, I'm almost waiting for, like, arrested for animal battery charges so I can be like, aha!
God.
It had to be something. It had to be something.
It's got to be the hair. He's like Samson. You just got to cut his hair.
Maybe that's it. Maybe I will be his Delilah.
We've got well into the weeds. What was the question?
I'll ask it. I'll ask it again. I'll just
wanted to tell my humorous hair anecdote.
I liked it.
Absolutely. I think we enjoyed hearing it. So thank you. But to get back to the question, tournaments. People are very excited for them. When do you think we'll be able to see the draft modes and the associated tournaments?
Being forced to confirm the timeline. I thought that was so hardful.
You're back.
That was Michael Sanders level prevarication.
Look, draft mode and tournaments.
America needs to reestablish themselves as a dominant force in the world. Right? That's how you answer a question.
Yeah, but the tournaments. When are the tournaments?
I mean, tournaments could mean so many things. It depends on what your definition of is. No, that's before your time. That was a Clinton one. Never mind. Yeah. So, roadmap. We are coming out with a very exciting, robust. I'm overusing robust. I'm gonna have to get the source out, but a very sexy questing system that comes out in a couple weeks. Right now, we have you get a little bit of extra XP playing your first couple matches each day. We're coming out with a really nicely curated set of daily and weekly and seasonal quests. Those all come out in 2 weeks-ish. So that's a lot of fun. And actually, I don't mind saying, within the Web3 and even the Web2 gaming spaces and mobile card gaming spaces, the quests suck. Like we are coming out with all kinds of fun quests that build this fun thing, do this fun thing, try to give you a little bit of a quandary. Obviously, they can't all be incredibly difficult, and we've curated the difficulty. But there are full games, great games, designed by people I used to work with that I'm huge fans of, and still, all of them have your quests are play 2 games, play 5 games, attack with 5 creatures, like play 8 spells of this color, I look through the spells, other games. It's such a missed opportunity to come up with something fun. Obviously, it's supposed to be a bit of a rote, quotidian, if you will, daily feature, but there's some real room to expand there, and I'm happy to say we're exploring the entire rehearsal space when it comes to quests. So those will be out in a couple weeks. The next significant thing is going to be about 7.5 weeks from now. I think you're looking at July 3rd, which will be the introduction of Season 22. And at that time, we're having sort of what we call our onboarding renaissance, which has all sorts of good stuff coming out. To touch on, this is just improving our onboarding metric and funnels and all sorts of boring business stuff. But as far as the game goes, we're coming out with new starter decks. So, as mentioned in the roadmap, right now our balancing mechanism between single prism heroes and multi-prism heroes is multi-prism heroes have the advantage of you can build with 2 prisms worth of cards. So there's about, 150 cards per prism, so you get 300 cards to build from. Single prism heroes, you only get half that, but your deck only has to have 25 cards in it. And so that thinner deck, in theory, is a bit of an advantage, but all the research we've done and all the data we have says that advantage is insufficient compared to the first one. So basically, single prism heroes are close to unplayable. You can obviously play them, but you're not going to win a whole hell of a lot. You're just, the limited card pool is too much. So, screw that. It's going to be 30 cards for every deck, and we're coming out with hero abilities, which does a lot of fun stuff for us. Our heroes will have different, again, very interesting abilities, not just spend 2 mana to do 1 damage. Not everyone has these very flavorful abilities that play into what we think of that character. We have a very diverse crew of characters, and we're looking to really flesh that space out. Up until now, all our heroes had the same ability, really, which is I do 1 damage, and these are the cards you can play if you select me. But other than that, they were largely homogenous. Very excited to, again, explore the rehearsal space. So we'll have the new starter decks. We'll have that. We are pushing our account creation and wallet creation later in our onboarding processes. This is just a way that just keeps more people around. As soon as you say to people, hey, make an account, a lot of them run for the hills. And certainly when you say to people these days, hey, make a wallet, terrifying news. People run screaming for the hills for you are a dirty NFT scammer. Not actually true, but perception dictates reality to a certain degree, and as I have no doubt you gentlemen are aware, as Web3, we're having a bit of a PR problem right now. So
sure.
And there's no advantage to rushing that at people until you need it. I think the best time to tell someone that they have this cool Web3 wallet is when you've put something in it. Hey, congratulations, you won this great asset. Here it is in a wallet. This stores your crap. And then later down the line, if they want to put something else in it, that's wonderful, but we've pushed that as far back as we go. And again, Horizon Blockchain Games, including Skyweaver, has 3 outstanding products, one of which is Sequence, which is our own very sexy back-end building and wallet system, which we are happy to have exported to a lot of places and is looking tremendous. So once those 2 things are done, and concurrently also in that renaissance, I should say, we have onboarding quests then, which our onboarding right now is very good. We have a very nice tutorial, and then you unlock certain cards, but it's doesn't have enough signposts on the road for me, so we're going to add an onboarding quest tree, and that's going to teach you like where the quests are and to look at the quests, and that's how you're going to progress in and unlock all the decks and smooth that out really nicely. After that, we have, as you alluded to, 2 of 3 really significant updates that are coming later this year. You can't have the summer, I'm afraid. But we have drafts and tournaments, which, as we mentioned, dovetail nicely and a bit work hand in hand because they both involve setting up matches and certain aspects. The same there. And then in addition, we have a significant update to our economy where we're introducing 2 more in-game currencies, one called Spark, one called Weave. There's a lot to talk about there. But they obviously also are tied in significantly to, say, tournaments and drafts, as they are what you use to get in and frequently what you get out as well. So the exact order in which those 3 features deploy is still a little bit up in the air. They've all been largely fully spec'd at this point. We're developing them all in parallel, which is a unique challenge, but it's the smarter way to do it, and they all interact with each other very nicely. So going to be a little bit, but extremely excited for... I think the reason I'm most optimistic about it is the people. I mean, the Skyweaver was announced, I believe, 4 years ago next month. That was June of 2019. And there are a number of employees who have been with the company, 4+ years, 5 years. And when we went through the roadmap, there was what to me seemed like very genuine. I'm not talking about Michael Sanders' enthusiasm, where it's so omnipresent and ubiquitous. You're like, is this real? Like, is he laughing at me behind my back? Like, he seems really happy to see me, but does he go in the men's room and just crack up at that old dude? Oh, no, I'm suspicious. Not that kind of enthusiasm. True, genuine enthusiasm. I wonder if Michael's going to see this at all.
He might. He certainly might. I love the fact that you have started using sexy as a synonym for robust. I think that's insightful in many ways.
My wife is both sexy and robust. God, as long as Michael Sanders and my wife don't watch this podcast, we're in great.
No, you're safe. I don't think anyone wants to be called particularly robust. Anyway, not to return to the weeds, I want to discuss onboarding a little bit more. I think Skyweaver's always struck me as a very interesting case in Web3 when it comes to onboarding. I know I've mentioned this at least once on the podcast before, but we had at Gamescom, Skyweaver had a booth, and it had a booth in the normal games section, and many people were coming and playing it on the tablets you had set up, and they had no idea that it was a blockchain game.
Yep.
And they were always surprised to learn that. How much of a focus does Skyweaver have on onboarding Web 2 players, for want of a better term?
Well, huge. I can't imagine why any company would be like, don't want those Web 2 players. I really just want the dyed-in-the-cloth Web 3 people. If you haven't, if you don't have 0x and a full wallet address tattooed on some part of your body, don't play our game. I am unabashedly in favor of limited application of Web3 protocols and procedures and blockchain existence in Web3 games. I think one of the mistakes that I have seen in many of the blockchain games and Web3 games that I have perused and played is the over-application of Web3. It does lots of great things. True digital ownership adds another factor to everything. Certainly when you went from playing traditional card games like I did when I was a kid, you played Uno, or you played poker, or you played, board game, you played backgammon or Parcheesi or Monopoly or something, then you would start playing Magic and they'd be like, yeah, careful with that card, it's worth $10. And you're like, really? Oh. Like, it just adds this whole other thing where you're like, wait, there's value and tradability and a market that exists. Like, it's incredibly great. That being said, you don't need every part of every gaming experience to exist on the blockchain. And one of the things I've said on the record a couple of times now is that I think my famous example for this is the dirty loincloth example. If you're making a fantasy game where it is Web3 compliant, it exists on the blockchain, and you go out and you spend a week farming Ethereum and Mithril and harvesting oak from the greatest tree in the forest, and you put it together and find the wizard and he enchants your sword and it's this giant, beautiful, flaming rainbow whatever thing, yeah, that should probably be on the blockchain. But when you started that game, you were probably naked but for a soiled loincloth. That didn't really need to be on the blockchain. No one's going to want that. Everybody started with one. That can just be a Web2 asset. That's fine. That's okay. It will honestly make the Web3 asset seem more special when you receive the first one. And to their credit, especially prior to myself becoming part of the company, Horizon is an incredibly technically adroit and sophisticated company, and they are full of serious Web3 devotees. I'm a Web3 guy. I think the eventual application manifestation of the technology is inevitable. I don't know to what extent it eventually gets. I don't know if we get to full medical records, and if you don't have your own blockchain, you don't exist according to the world. But I'm sure it's going to be a huge part of our life, and more importantly, a huge part of gaming to be germane to this conversation. But I don't know how many bumps are in that road. I frequently liken Web3 gaming right now, or even sort of Web3 in general and blockchains, to like driving a car in 1912. Like, cars are awesome, and cars are going to be awesome, and cars are obviously going to be great. But if you have one, when they just came out, there's no interstate, there's no roads, there's an issue finding a new tire, there's it's the apparatus around making it work, and frequently also you have some bad actors. So you have one garage within 100 miles, and that guy can charge you $500 for a tire, and what else are you going to do in that situation? So, yeah, so I'm a big fan of. So I was saying, to their credit, at Horizon, despite being a very, very technically adroit company, again, Philippe, who's our director of product, developed his own ERC standard and was one of the authors. These guys are amazingly, and again, Skyweaver is just our game that uses many other technologies they're designing in the back end, and I'm amazed at how much restraint they have shown with not over Web3ing it, with not over applying some sort of economic model. I think there are games that are dead before they come out, because frequently, and you'll see them presented as this, we've designed this really cool economic system where you farm Zingblats and you turn them into hair pomade, which you can then use to harvest smooth love potions, which makes you $1.75. It's amazing. And now we're going to make a game around that. That's a lot of limitations to make a game around, and you're eschewing the ability to do great stuff that games do, which is everything you do now has to be considerate of that model. So we've gone really, really far to the weeds of creating an amazing game and features for that game, and then figuring out how best to apply both economic revision and a Web3 infrastructure that makes sense. And I think that's the best way to do that. And if you look at any, you don't get very many good games that are just, we're going to take advantage of this technology. So if you look at, Farmville or something, or whatever you consider the first of the great social games, where the real advancement of technology was, we have found a way to viralize this game. Like, if you want your carrots to come out of the ground faster, you have to ask your 4 aunts and uncles to play this game with you. That game was at least successful, but I don't think many people would protest that, say, Farmville or most of the early Zynga crop were very good games. So, so as far as onboarding goes, to get around to your original question, yes, I think it's important to make your appeal significant to people who just want to play a good game. I think it would be foolish to be like, no, you can't just want to play a good game. You have to want to invest or be familiar with NFTs. Like any good game opens itself up to a number of gaming primitives, a number of different psychographic groups. World of Warcraft, which we talked about before, was amazing because there were 10 different types of players who didn't even really need to interact, that existed in one universe. Robert, you might want to, like, you were a real single player guy, you just wanted to explore the land, and you wanted to clear the map, and you wanted to do all the objectives and visit all the cities. And John might be more competitive. He might be a PvP guy, so he wanted to hang out in the battlegrounds all day. But then there would be someone else who wanted to collect the pets, and someone who wanted to collect the mounts, and someone who wanted to big PvE guys who wanted to go on 25-man raids into dungeons and slay dragons. And there's so many different ways to interact with the game. I don't know why you would ever eschew the largest of them, which would be, in this situation, Web 2 gamers. There's a lot of them. And certainly I think any good business model would want a piece of those.
Yeah, you've just returned me to my early days playing WoW. I was just a rogue.
Sure.
The good PvP days back in the day. That's brought up some memories, that's for sure.
Little Alterac Valley. Were you an Alterac Valley boy?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
I can see that in my view.
Well, hey, there we go. I wanted to touch on another point in the roadmap, which was we mentioned the two new in-game currencies, Spark and Weave, and they will factor into the new card rarities, which is kind of another layer on top of the card grades. Now, of course, with Gods Unchained, which is another Web3 TCG, we've kind of got rarities there as well.
Yeah.
With other digital TCGs, we've got Hearthstone, of course, got Magic and Yu-Gi-Oh! And every other card game out there. What can we expect from Skyweaver's card rarities? Because reading it, it sounds like, oh, hey, we're inputting this system, but there's not too much detail. I completely understand you might not want to reveal everything here, but what can we expect?
Oh boy, that's a tough one because there's not too much I can reveal because it's all being worked out and simulated pretty frequently. So we're doing a lot of work on back end. We're working with a number of economists because this really, the card rarity system is an economic consideration. It's also a gameplay consideration in two ways, and I'll speak to those real quickly. One is you want cards of a certain rarity because you want to increase basically your dopamine experiences at some point. There are certainly advantages to having every card being evenly rare. They're dwarfed by the disadvantages, but you could argue that there is a very simple system, which is every card is equally as common and uncommon. So you know right where you're standing at any time. One of the things about rarity that can be difficult is it can be confusing or difficult to understand. So if you were trying to adopt new players, there would be some merit to saying all the cards are evenly as rare. But as I alluded to in the past, and to speak more specifically to now, Skyweaver is a very deep game right now. It is frankly a little bit too deep. It's like if you go to if Michael Sanders had a swimming pool. Bear with me here. This has become the Michael Sanders podcast. This is outstanding. You ever see those swimming pools where I think it's to like show off or prove how buff you are? They don't have any steps or shallow end. It's literally just a rectangle, and it's right in both sides, all four sides, 14 feet down, straight the hell across, and out the second. It's just a rectangle or a three-dimensional rectangle shooed into the ground. We're a little too close to that right now. We need to add some steps and sort of a shallow end with some walkway in there now. We have we frequently talk about how deep our strategy is, and it's deep. We need a little more shallow strategy. So we need to do a better job of sort of making the entry, the wading pool area of the Skyweaver pool a little more accessible. And one of the ways you can do that is by gatekeeping certain rarities of cards that are super complex. One of the areas in which our onboarding can improve, we've seen, is that when you get outside of our tutorial, your first couple games after that, frequently you and your opponent will end up with a lot of units in play. Like I'll have 5 and you'll have 5. And many of the cards in our starter decks right now have a number of abilities, and you can end up where it is a very difficult puzzle to solve. And we will have some number of players be like, fuck it, that isn't worth my time. It's an interesting puzzle, and it's a great game, but it is a lot to get thrown at you 3 minutes out of the tutorial. So there's a lot of ways to fix that, and one of them is you're getting less rare cards as you come out of that experience, which tend to be less complex, potentially less powerful, but not necessarily, but certainly less complex. So one of the advantages of adding a rarity system is it allows us to curate the experience a little bit and have you hit a more gentle player experience as you learn to play the game. The other one is just to be able to do things that are exciting. One of the things I frequently talk to our design team about is making the game fun. And one of the simple ways in which we begin to talk about that are, what are things in gaming that you've enjoyed? Like, think back to over the last year, board games, dice games, video games, shooters, real-time strategy, roguelike, whatever the hell you're playing. What were the times, quickly, just like, very quick reaction, what did you really enjoy doing? And frequently among card gamers, you will get opening this card, getting this rare item, seeing this thing where I was in a draft and I opened a rare card that was shiny and I knew it was worth 100. So adding concepts of randomness, adding concepts of rarity where some things are more scarce than others, just opens you up to a whole other realm of positive experiences for players. So it's one of those things that obviously has to be done well. And one of the things we're simulating is how long it takes players to do various tasks. If you get into the game and you play the tutorial and you want to make a decent competitive deck, we're fine with that taking you so many hours. We're not fine with that taking a month. So if you come in, it's a free-to-play game. You obviously can spend money on it, but it's a free-to-play game. How long does it take you to be competitive if you don't want to spend $1? And we are making sure that that number stays at an acceptable figure. So there's understandably some concern, and I would feel the exact same way with going like, hey, we're going to make some cards more rare now. Everyone's immediate nightmare scenario is, oh my God, I'm going to have to either spend $1,000 or 1,000 hours to build the deck I want. We're absolutely not letting that happen. So it's one of those things where when people are concerned, I say to them, listen, I can give you 10 reasons why having every card identically as rare is bad. And so we're moving this way. I would ask you to concede that some movement is reasonable. Wait till you see what we roll out, and then hopefully it's good. That's certainly the plan.
I think, I completely agree. I think there are a lot of knock-on effects to achieving this sort of rarity parity where you end up with kind of a homogenous experience as well, which bleeds into a lot of other areas of the gameplay where it can be quite dull, and you'll find that the meta will just establish itself quite strongly if everything's similar and everyone's got the same cards. So I completely agree, but I have a follow-up question because there is obviously the opposite side to that coin, which is balance. And I think I'd love to hear your thoughts on how you balance a TCG with regards to card rarity, but also you're adding in another element of balance, which is hero abilities.
Yep.
So can I get your thoughts on how, because I've never really put that much thought into how you balance a TCG. And I imagine it's a complex affair.
Yeah, it's an incredibly complex affair. I will not back away from one of my more controversial comments of this year, which I've gotten a lot of feedback on, which is balance is the most overrated thing to people who play TCGs but don't understand how to make one. Balance is important. Okay. You clearly want to stop something from being completely the hell out of control, but I find balance actually far less important than having foil strategies and sort of a dynamic involving metagame. If there is at least something that beats everything up, let me rephrase that. If everything has something to which it loses, you're in pretty good shape. Like if you have rock, scissors, paper, Spock, lizard, and lizard beats everything but Spock, as long as Spock beats lizard, you're doing good. That's fine. That means that lizard can't ever get too out of control because people will start playing Spock. So the general hierarchy, sort of the Maslow's hierarchy, if you will, of game design decision, for me, I actually have balance coming in fourth. I'm 3/4 of the way through a book I was writing on this, but I think the most important thing in designing a game is that it is understandable. It is grokkable. Number one is someone can look at it in the format and the context in which it is presented and say, oh, I understand this in a reasonably short period of time. They realize what it is pretty quickly, and they can start to get it pretty quickly. The longer it takes to do that, the more people you just lose before they ever play the game. This doesn't mean, this isn't necessarily the rules to making a great game. This is more the rules for making a successful game. And the first rule on that is have a game that people will adopt, which means you have to be able to start to understand it in a minute and feel like you're starting to get it. Like there's sort of 2 steps in the adoption of a game. One is, okay, I realize what you're telling me, and then you start to realize how the pieces fit together, and this works with that. You want both those things to come upon pretty thrift. So the first one for me is that a game is understandable. The second one is that a game is fun. So, okay, you had to learn how to play it and understand what the hell you were doing, and then you should enjoy playing it. If your core game mechanics, if the core game loop are not enjoyable, nothing the hell else matters. You can make a wonderfully balanced game. There are tons of balanced games that are not fun, and you don't hear much about them. So that's number 2. Then the third would be have a dynamic and evolving metagame and have efficient foil strategies. As long as there are lots of ways to skin the apple, I worry less about balance, which comes in as number 4. Yes, try to make sure that strength and agility and wisdom and all the different prisms are roughly even to each other, and the heroes are even with each other, and the hero abilities are even with each other. That's important. We have people who do just that, and it's a priority. That being said, frequently when people talk about our game design team, like they will call it the balance team. And I'm trying to get them to do, again, I'm being like, what was the most fun thing you had in gaming? Build that. So we're leaning into balance a little bit by, we're trying to buff more and nerf less now. So I will give you an example, and these are both gross oversimplifications of a process, and I know we're running a little short on time. But basically, what would happen in the past is we do a patch every 2 weeks, largely for balance reasons. And we would see a deck that had both in community feedback, which we keep a close eye on, of course, and in our internal data, which we gather, there's a deck that's performing very strongly. And our inclination would be to reduce some of the power in that deck. That's a basic patching cadence. I have started promoting, and we are in the throes of switching over to a system where we actually, instead, make something that beats it. And if possible, make something that is currently not highly represented in the metagame better enough that it beats it. So if we're having a problem with Bob the Builder's hero ability and it's just too good, rather than nerf that ability, we would try to boost something else up to make it tier S, tier A, that beats that, especially from somewhere that previously wasn't super powerful. And this does, obviously, all sorts of good things for us. It keeps the metagame dynamic and fresh, checks that other thing, and gives us a couple weeks to fix it again. But again, let's make it fun. Let's make sure people are having a good time. Let's add draft modes and hero abilities and all these things. Balancing hero abilities that you specifically alluded to is the most difficult thing I've done in my 20 years of doing this. The hero abilities are omnipresent on the hero, so there's so many. It's very screw-upable. If you make them too strong, that's obviously a problem. If you make them too weak, that's a problem because they don't mean anything. And again, we need them to be fairly strong. They're currently, for the first 5 that are coming out shortly, compensating for the fact that our single prism heroes are not adequate. So they need to overcome that, but they can't be so powerful that they make the cards you're playing irrelevant. Like, I was playing Ada and her ability, it's so strong, the cards I play don't matter. Well, that's a bad feeling, so we can't do that. It has to fit in well with the cards in the starter deck it is released in. I have that limited concern of making that synergy. It's got to be a good beacon for what we want to do, developing that hero and their cards in future sets and expansions, but at the same time, it has to be respectful of the cards that have been previously issued, which, of course, were issued without knowing this was coming. And by respectful, I mean, it can't make too many of them obsolete, basically. You wanted to enhance many of those cards or make some of them more interesting. By definition, you're going to make some less obsolete. I'll give you a very simple example real quick. Ada's ability, as we currently have it defined, and this is one we released, is the first unit you summon each turn has +1 power. Now, a really bad way to do it would be the first Treefolk unit you summon each turn has +2 power. Because now, either if you're playing Ada, you're playing Treefolk, or you have a blank ability, and we've quasi-nerfed 92% of her cards that are Treefolk all at once, and that feels like crap. But I would submit to you, even the first unit you summon each turn that has +1 power, itself is to some degree restricted. You want to be playing 1, but probably ideally exactly 1 unit every turn. So while this feels more inclusive, I've sort of said, if you are thinking of doing Ada Weenie Rush, we've disincentivized that a little bit. Playing 2 units on the second turn and 3 units on the third turn, well, 3 of the 5 units I just listed don't get her bonus, as opposed to 1 unit using your mana curve every turn is perfectly using it. Likewise, if you wanted to do some sort of Ada more creatureless spiel, which isn't something you can do, but if you try to play very few units in an Ada deck, you wouldn't be using her ability many turns. So one of the things that our next larger expansion, which will be, I think at this point, early next year, will have single-player progression in it for the first time, and that will include unlocking multiple abilities per hero. So at this point, less than a year from now, Ada will have 3 abilities, and you will choose whether to build with Ada Inspiring or Ada Beastmaster or Ada Blade Master or what have you. And that will allow us to retroactively fix that, which again is just one of many concerns. But yes, designing the hero abilities, we will fail to some degree to make them perfectly balanced. And that's natural. We will react quickly. As long as we've made them fun and interesting, and hopefully, at least within a couple weeks, everything that is doing very well has something that beats it, I think we'll be just fine. So that's sort of my spiel on balance. But
it's fascinating to hear the other side of the equation as you know, someone who's been on the other side of that for such a long time, whether it's with Counter-Strike, League of Legends, Cardfight Vanguard, you know, Yu-Gi-Oh, countless TCGs. It's very interesting to hear about it from, you know, a design perspective and what goes through your mind. Because as you say, I think it's far more complex than I think a lot of people realize, and it is incredibly tough. So, yeah, best of luck with Skyweaver.
It's the thing, but again, it's not as important. The other side of the coin is it's not as simple as people seem to think it is, but it's not. Again, as long as you keep it somewhat dynamic, it ends up being a self-regulating mechanism, which is to say, if this deck is overall really good against the meta, more people play it, and as long as something beats it, then people start playing the thing that beats it, and it sort of fixes itself. Like draft is another self-regulating mechanism. If you're drafting Magic the Gathering and you're drafting, I don't know, Odyssey Torment, which is a format where black was really good, well, it kind of fixes itself because more people were drafting black and they were sharing all the black cards, and more people were drafting things that were good against black because they knew a lot of people play black, and it sort of fixes itself to some degree. So it is a bit of a daunting task, but I look at it more as a particularly great opportunity.
Yeah, I think it's from a player perspective. If you see something that's overpowered, it's always nerf this, and there's always more solutions to that. So it's fascinating to hear kind of the thought process there. I'm going to get to my last question, which is a bit of a softball. I think it's a great one to end on. So for many of the people watching this, I'm sure they've played Skyweaver before. They might not be active players. They might have played it some time ago, and this is refreshing their memory. Right. Or there might be people that have not played Skyweaver in the past. So with everything that's coming up this year, speaking directly to the listeners, why should they play Skyweaver right now?
Can they play Skyweaver in about a month or a couple months? Like, why should they play Skyweaver right now? You should play Skyweaver right now because it's a great game with a real depth of strategy and digital ownership, and it's just a unique experience within the space because you can, truly own your own Web3 cards that you acquire. Like, I think Skyweaver right now is a tremendous amount of fun, and that's one of the reasons I'm here and happy to be here. But in the future, we're really coming into, I think, in the next 8 or 9 months, what I would call product maturity, without making any assurances as to we're technically in a beta. That decision as to when we come out of beta is thankfully over my head. But it's going to get a lot of fun. If there is something with Skyweaver I'm not super excited about right now, it's that there isn't necessarily always that much to do. Frequently it's like, well, I did that and I finished that. What am I going to do now? So we're going to give you drafts to do and puzzles and single player stuff to do and tournaments and all number of other things and daily quests that are exciting and require some deck building and some ledger domain in that area. And so I really think we're coming into a time where we're really gonna spread our wings a little bit and do some pretty exciting things. So yeah, we would love to have you, and we expect to see all of you.
Fantastic. Very fascinating year ahead for Skyweaver for sure. Eddie, thank you very much for joining us. It's been an amazing conversation. I feel like we could probably carry on for hours, but
yeah, we said before the episode that you had recently done a podcast that was 3 hours 10 minutes. I was like, oh god, I don't know if I could do that.
The host tapped
now
out.
We're an hour in, and I think yeah, I could do that. I've got a lot more questions.
Yeah, it's again, there's no better way to end this podcast than with this statement. I went to the Michael Sanders School of Being an Effective Executive, which is have a nice head of hair, leave them wanting more, and be very glib at all times.
There's no better way to end. Eddie, thank you so much for your time. And hey, fingers crossed we might see you back on the pod again sometime.
I'll be looking forward to it.
Well, there we go. Episode 65 of the Mint One podcast with Eddie Fears. That was a very fun episode.
It was.
We chatted a little bit before we went onto the recording with Eddie, and then we've chatted for about 20 minutes after about everything and anything. He's one of those guys that if you could be, and we might be, you could be the shittest podcast host in history. If you get Eddie on, he'll make you look good, because you could ask the most boring questions and he'll spin it into something good. Do you know what I mean? He's got that sort of, he's just passionate and knowledgeable, and that combination I think comes across really well.
Yeah, his passion and quite frankly knowledge and expertise of gaming, but as a whole, but more specifically TCGs, was fascinating.
Yeah.
Especially, as I said, being on the other side of balance patches and buffs and nerfs for 15 years at this point in however many competitive games, it's very interesting to hear from an actual developer side, as someone who's been there and done it, what their thought process is when it comes to something that is a little too overpowered, or maybe the players don't like it old too much. It definitely gets the mind racing, and you realize that there's so much more to game development than you'd ever really considered, and it's so great to speak to someone who really has that passion and that knowledge and eloquently can share that expertise. So fascinating episode. I do hope we can get Eddie back in the future as well, because that was superb.
Yeah, I wonder if, just a quick aside, I wonder how many digital TCGs have people leading the line that have a background in TCGs that predate digital TCGs. Do you know what I mean? I bet a lot of TCGs hire game devs that are experienced game devs, not people like... what was the first date he referenced playing it? Magic the Gathering was like 91 or...
Yeah, it was the date Magic the Gathering was first announced, I believe, which
exactly.
is like in the 80s.
You're not going to find someone who's more experienced with that genre. And a digital TCG is or should be just a TCG, but online. So I reckon that gives a real edge over the companies that are just building. Because we know in Web3, there's TCGs a 10 a penny because... they're quite easy to build. They're not that demanding in terms of graphics or anything like that. Obviously, you've got the difficulties of balancing and the game actually not being any good. But getting an MVP out isn't that difficult. And I bet a load of them don't have anywhere near the experience that Eddie has.
No. And, I mean, we've said both on the pod and via our own websites in the past just how much we enjoy Skyweaver. I mean, that was... Gosh, I think the first article I did on Skyweaver must have been nearly 2 years ago. It's only got better from there. At NFT Insider, we named it our favourite blockchain game of 22.
Yep.
And with their roadmap for 23, I'm very, very excited to see, the card rarities, the hero abilities, the tournaments, the draft mode, all of this stuff that's in the pipeline. So, big things coming up this year, and I can't wait to see how it all goes. But it is time to scoot our way out of the pod. So, Rob, where can we find you?
Look at the camera. You can find me at tokengamer.io, where you'll find the latest blockchain gaming news, giveaways, bits and pieces. But then please download the app, the Token Gamer app, which is on iOS and Android. We are rolling out updates, I swear, every day at the moment. So I'm sorry if you have to keep updating, and that is frustrating. But we've rebuilt a load of the back end, and we've implemented Polygon, and we're rolling loads of new stuff out. We're full steam ahead on that. So that's good fun. LinkedIn, I'm using LinkedIn a lot more lately, even though it does kind of annoy me with people that are patting themselves on the back all the time, their various nuggets of generic wisdom. But yes, LinkedIn, please find me and Token Gamer on there. We're sharing a lot of stuff on there. And then Twitter at Token Gamer News. John, where can we find you?
So for the latest Web3 gaming news, NFT news, metaverse news, all that good stuff, it is nftinsider.io. Do I share this now?
Yep. Don't know what it is.
Okay, well, there we go. We're redesigning our website. The new site design should be going live in the next few weeks. There's a whole bunch of changes and things to look forward to, so keep an eye out for that. On social, it is at nftinsider_io on pretty much everything, including now TikTok. So if you're a millennial or younger, then I mean, it's open to anybody, but that's all I could use using TikTok. Then you can follow us.
Let's follow you on TikTok. Is that?
Then you can go follow us at NFTinsider_IO. You'll find clips from our YouTube videos, our podcasts, all that good stuff. Might not be live by the time this podcast goes on, but anyway, there'll be stuff coming. Then for me personally, it's at HydroPowered, HYDROPWRD. Twitter is the best one for me, but you can find me everywhere. I've been tweeting as much lately. There's been not that many things for me to get annoyed about, so, more positive.
I'll send you some stuff.
Oh, God. Here we go. So you can expect some tweets from me very soon, but there we go. And that, I believe, is everything from me. I will add a quick addendum relating to Atomic Hub. By the time this podcast goes out, I believe our new badge system is now live. So if you're a creator on the Wax blockchain, you've not done so already, go and read that and go reapply for your new badges, because your whitelisted tick will not exist anymore. So go and do that. And we've got Avalon coming up as a drop, which I believe might be the ad spot for this or might be for episode 64. I don't know yet, so I'm going to go record it after this episode. So that's all from me. So thank you very much for watching episode 65 of the Mint Podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, like, subscribe, and a comment. Let us know who you would like us to speak to next, and hit that bell icon so you don't miss the latest episodes. If you're on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, 5-star podcast review would be fantastic. Thank you very much for tuning in, everybody. We hope you tune in again next week.